Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roach Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. There have been tons of crazy weekends in college football this season, but I don't think anything was crazier than the week we saw last week in week 7 of college football. It was incredible how many results did not go the way that people were expecting, but that's what makes college football a lot of fun. And I'm going to break down the week 8 AP Top 25 poll and see all the changes that have been made in the rankings due to the wins and losses that occurred last week and see what I think about them. Georgia's still number 1. They're getting by, and a lot of people still believe that they're the best team in college football, but more and more people are starting to side with the Michigan Wolverines, and they're getting more first-place votes because they've been dominating everybody, while Georgia has been struggling a bit against Vanderbilt, Auburn, and South Carolina, but they're still getting wins, and they haven't been bad enough for people to completely have Michigan supplant Georgia for that spot. But for now, Georgia's at number 1, and they have a bye next week. Michigan's at number 2. They won against Indiana this past week. They've been blowing out everybody that they played, just like I said, winning every single game by 30-plus points. It's been incredible watching how well the Wolverines have been playing. They have their rival Michigan State on the road next week. You would think that would be an easy win. Never want to overlook anybody, but if Michigan keeps playing the way that they are, then they're going to continue to garner more first-place votes and can eventually supplant Georgia for that spot. Ohio State's at number 3. They dominated Purdue on the road last week, and they've got a massive showdown with the Penn State Nittany Lions at home. If they can win that game, then I think they will definitely solidify themselves as the third best team in college football, because as you can see, they're barely over Florida State in the rankings with the amount of votes that the AP voters submitted. But Ohio State is still a really good football team, and the way that they've played, I think for the most part, to me, shows they should be the third-ranked team in the sport. Florida State's at number 4, and last week they blew out Syracuse. Outside of the Boston College game where they've been shaky, Florida State has looked good in every other game, and I think there is an argument between them and Ohio State, but we're going to find out with the Buckeyes next week whether they are the legitimate number 3 team or if Florida State has a case to move up to number 3. They have a date with Duke up next. That's not an easy game, but if Florida State can win that game, they'll stay in the top 5. Washington's at number 5, and they beat their rival Oregon for the second straight season in a row by 3 points. That was a fantastic win for the Huskies. Michael Penix Jr. had himself a potential Heisman moment at the end of the fourth quarter with his touchdown pass to Roma Dunze. That was a fantastic game and a fantastic performance from Penix. And I believe that if Washington can continue to play like this, they have a legitimate shot to be a college football playoff contender. They have Arizona State up next. You would think they can win that game. Can't overlook any opponent. Can't have a hangover after the big win against Oregon. But that was a great win for Washington, and they deserve to be in the top 5 for now. Oklahoma falls a spot. They did not do anything wrong, but with the way Washington played, the voters moved them up to number 5. Oklahoma falls because they had a bye week to number 6. They have UCF up next. The Sooners have looked good. That Texas win is still great, and as long as Oklahoma can keep winning, they'll stay in the top 10 and in the college football playoff hunt. Penn State's at number 7. They played UMass this past week. A weird time to play a non-conference opponent, but the Nittany Lions blew them out. They have Ohio State on the road next week. If they can beat Ohio State, then the Nittany Lions could move up into the top 5 and give themselves a shot to be a CFP contender, possibly a team that can win the Big Ten. That's going to be a tough matchup. A lot of people believe in Penn State, but this is a put up or shut up type of game. We're going to know how good Penn State is after this week. Texas is at number 8. They had a bye just like Oklahoma, and they have at Houston on the road next week. Houston got a big win against West Virginia this past week, so Texas definitely has to play good on defense because Houston can put up some points, but the Longhorns have looked good, even in the loss to Oklahoma, and I think that they're definitely a top 10 team, but can't slip up against the Houston Cougars. Oregon's at number 9. They lost to Washington, and I'm glad that the AP voters only dropped them 1 spot. They do not deserve to fall any further. Oregon is a legitimate top 10 team, at least for now with the way that they've been playing. Washington or Oregon could have won that game. Bo Nix unfortunately fell on the short end of the stick, but he had a great performance just like Michael Penix. The Ducks do have an interesting game against Washington State at home this week. Washington State is a team that has been been struggling the last couple weeks, but they could always bounce back and play better. So Oregon will have to not let their guard down. But if the Ducks can win that game, they'll stay in the top 10 of the rankings for now. North Carolina is at number 10, and they won their first big test in a lot of people's minds against the Miami Hurricanes at home. They're now at number 10, and they even leapfrog Alabama. The Tar Heels still have question marks on offense and defense, but Drake May has been playing better the last couple weeks. Their run game is pretty solid, and I do believe with the NCAA finally allowing Tez Walker to play, I think North Carolina's offense is hitting another gear, and they're doing just enough on defense. They're doing better on defense than they did last year, which has allowed North Carolina to look like a better team. I think being ranked at number 10 is pretty fair for the Tar Heels, and they have a shot to win the ACC if they can keep up their level of play. They have a date against Virginia up next. That's a game North Carolina cannot overlook. Alabama's at number 11, and they won against Arkansas last week. They have Tennessee at home. After Tennessee beat Alabama last year in Neyland Stadium, Alabama's going to have to return the favor, beat the Volunteers if they want to have a shot to move into the top 10 and still be a college football playoff contender. But Alabama's been getting by the last couple weeks, and the Crimson Tide look to be improving slightly week by week. Oregon State's at number 12, and they won over UCLA, a team that just beat Washington State. That was a good win for Oregon State. Their only loss is to Washington State on the road. The Beavers still are a fringe CFP contender if they can win out, and they do still look like one of the best teams in the Pac-12. They have a bye next week, but the Beavers have been playing pretty good football the last couple weeks. Ole Miss is at number 13. They had a bye, but they play at Auburn next week. Auburn is a tough team to play in Jordan-Hare, so Ole Miss will have to play their best, but the Rebels have made for themselves a case to be in the top 15, especially with that LSU win, but the Rebels are going to have to keep winning, especially if they want to stay a contender in the SEC West. Utah's at number 14. They were able to beat Cal this past week. They have USC on the road, and at the beginning of the season, most people probably would not have said that Utah would have any shot of beating USC, but the way the Trojans are playing lately, anything's possible. Utah's still a solid team. They've got a lot of injuries, but they're starting to get a bit more healthy, and if the Utes can continue to get healthy, maybe they'll have a shot to shock the USC Trojans. Notre Dame's at number 15, and they destroyed the USC Trojans this past week, absolutely annihilating them at home, 48-20. They have a bye next week, which is much deserved after the tough stretch of games they had against Duke, Louisville, Ohio State, and USC. Notre Dame split those two games. Notre Dame's probably the best two-loss team in the country right now, at least with the schedule that they played, and the Fighting Irish definitely look like a top 10 team the way they played against USC. Duke's at number 16. They beat NC State this past week. They have Florida State on the road up next. If Duke can win that game, they will shoot up these rankings once again, but that's a tall test for the Duke Blue Devils. Riley Leonard's still out hurt. That's tough for the Blue Devils, but their defense has been playing well, and that was a solid win against NC State last week. Tennessee's at 17. They beat A&M at home last week. They have at Alabama next week. That's going to be a tough game for the Volunteers. If they can beat Alabama, they'll have a shot to move up in these rankings and maybe still be a college football playoff contender. Obviously, that's not what a lot of people are expecting Tennessee to do. They're struggling on offense, but you never know. Anything can happen in football, and Tennessee is talented enough to beat Alabama, but that it will be tough for them to go on the road and be able to try to win. USC falls 8 spots to number 18 after losing to Notre Dame. A lot of people saw this coming with the way they played against Arizona, Colorado, and Arizona State. They were not winning those games by the amount that a lot of people felt that they should win those games by, and the fact that Caleb Williams was having to do everything just to get USC over the top. He finally had a rough performance, throwing 3 interceptions, which is unheard of for Caleb Williams, and USC's defense, like always, did not bail them out. So the Trojans fall 8 spots, and they're probably already out of the college football playoff race. Even if they won out, it would be tough for them to climb all the way back up in these rankings after that terrible loss to Notre Dame. LSU is at number 19. They were able to beat Auburn at home last week. They have Army up next. That's a game LSU you would think should win. The Tigers, like Notre Dame, are a 2-loss team, but definitely look top 25 worthy. Their defense has been struggling this season, but Jayden Daniels is fantastic on the offensive side of the ball, and the Tigers are still really talented and deserve to be in the top 20 for now. Missouri's at number 20. They get right back in these AP top 25 rankings after beating Kentucky handily on the road. That was a good win for Missouri and for Eli Drinkwitz. They're now bowl eligible. They're ranked at number 20 in the country, and I think Drinkwitz is now going to be off the hot seat for at least the way they're playing right now. They need to keep it up. They have a date with South Carolina up next. They can't overlook the Gamecocks, but if Missouri keeps playing well, they'll keep moving up in these rankings and in the minds of college football fans as a legitimate team. Louisville's at number 21, and they fall 7 spots after losing at Pittsburgh. Louisville's a team that a lot lot of people were skeptical with because they barely beat Indiana, Georgia Tech, and NC State early in the season. Then they beat Notre Dame when Notre Dame was at their worst. And then they turn around and have that proverbial letdown game at Pittsburgh. A tough place to play. Pittsburgh has not been a great team this year, but Louisville did not look good on the road. Jack Plummer made a lot of mistakes, and the Cardinals have fallen far in these rankings and probably out of college football playoff contention. They can still obviously win the ACC, but that's a loss right there that's not going to inspire a lot of faith in the Louisville Cardinals with college football fans. Air Force is at 22. They're finally ranked after beating Wyoming. Air Force has had some really good wins this season. A lot of teams they played haven't been that great, but they've blown them out. Now they just beat a Wyoming team that beat Fresno State and Texas Tech. So that's a good win for Air Force. I think they deserve to be in the top 25 right now, and they're playing great football. But they do have a tough test at Navy next week. Can't overlook the midshipmen. Tulane's at 23. They beat Memphis on the road last week. Now that Michael Pratt is healthy, Tulane's playing better football. And like Air Force, I think that they're one of the best group of 5 teams in the country. And one of these teams is going to be representing in the Cotton Bowl this year. Like every year, you have a group of 5 team in that bowl. So it's going to be interesting to see which team finishes higher in the top 25. But Tulane is a solid team. They have a date with North Texas up next. Can't overlook the Mean Green. But I do think that the Tulane Green Wave are a solid team. And with a healthy Michael Pratt, even without Todd D. Spears, they're still a top 25 worthy team. Iowa's at 24. They're back in these AP top 25 rankings because of the fact they won at Wisconsin last week. That's a good win. And Iowa's doing what Iowa does. When K. McNamara went out, I made a video on this a couple weeks ago, and I said I didn't feel like it was going to make a big difference for Iowa, whether McNamara was in or not, because Iowa wins with their defense, and their defense is starting to step up against the weaker offensive teams in the Big Ten, particularly the Big Ten West, and that's what Iowa did in this game. If Iowa's defense keeps playing well, they could win the West and finish in the AP top 25, but it isn't going to be because of their offense in any way, shape, or form. And at number 25, you got UCLA falling 7 spots after losing to Oregon State on the road. That's a tough loss, and UCLA, even though they have 2 losses, they played a tough schedule. They do have a big one over Washington State, so the AP voters have them ranked for now. They do play at Stanford next week, and Stanford just knocked off Colorado, so UCLA can't overlook them. But if they win that game, they should stay in the AP top 25 poll. And in the other C votes, you have James Madison, who's currently undefeated, Clemson, Florida, Washington State, who fell out after the loss to the Arizona Wildcats of all teams, Fresno State, Liberty, Kentucky after they lost to Missouri, fell out of the top 25, Wyoming, Kansas after they lost to Oklahoma State, they fell out, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and the Miami Hurricanes fell out after losing to North Carolina. All of these teams are solid and had their moments this season, and teams like James Madison and Liberty, who do not play tough opponents, they keep winning, they'll eventually get ranked. But this has been a wacky season so far in college football, but nothing was crazier than last week's game. So many results were not expected, and that made these AP top 25 rankings shift a lot. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, how the AP voters did this week, and whether you think some teams should be ranked higher or which teams you think should be ranked a little bit lower, and what result from last week's game surprised you guys the most. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.